bonus summer episode. Weren't expecting that, or were you? Maybe,
I was, personally.
Well,
yeah.
you were.
Yeah, I knew.
Oh, we all were, actually. We're all expecting it because I know we've all been excited, had a little bit of a break over summer, and we all thought we'd get together and get stoned.
It's actually
With Lael.
What a time to do it.
With Lael Stone.
Midsummer.
That's the reference. We're not actually getting stoned. Just,
Yeah.
It would be a funny interview.
So for those of you who are new to our podcast, we have had Lael twice before. She is a parenting expert. She helps parents to understand their childhood in order to be better parents. And she also helps kids with, I think, emotional intelligence, probably almost the lazy way to describe it. It's so much more, but if you were to look at it holistically, you help kids to understand their emotions and how to work through them. You have your own school. You are very in demand as a speaker. Your TED Talk now has over, what is it now? It's
3 million.
over 3 million views. So we're incredibly lucky to have Lael with us for the third time today.
Thank you.
Lael the third.
Yeah, this is your third. How about we let you speak? Hello, Lael. How are you?
Hi. It's nice to be back.
So good to have you back, Lael.
Thanks. I love chatting to you guys.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm feeling incredibly buzzed right now, and I think it's because of
I know why you're feeling
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Lael, you know, I've recently been doing these cold plunge things, and Hugh, you sent to me the other day this thing, which is like, if you hit 5 minutes in a cold plunge, your dopamine rises by 250%.
Yeah.
I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it.
You look it.
I'm glad because I was, rigorous scientific. I got it from Instagram.
Yeah. Well, it's right.
But I reckon whoever said it wasn't mine.
Source
Yeah.
Instagram.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is Instagram more credible than TikTok? I don't know which one. Like, they're both so super credible.
I think if you're choosing between the two, you're in trouble. So we're about to sort of start this new year, or we have started this new year, I guess, and this new school year particularly. You have a school of your own.
Mm-hmm, I do.
Not many people can say that.
No.
How
it's
is
true.
your school going?
My school's amazing. Yeah. We're in our 4th year now, and it's I have to say it's even better than what I dreamed it to be, which is pretty awesome when you build something and you put your heart and soul into something and you have a vision, and it actually has exceeded that for me, which is 100% to do with the amazing people that work there and bring on their energy to it. So, yeah, it's really epic. I'm very, very proud of what we've created.
I mean, you and LeBron James are the only two people.
Agassi.
And Agassi.
Yeah.
You should have meetings. You should call a meeting.
I'm up for that. Okay. Look, I know other people have also created schools.
Okay.
We've had some amazing mentors that have helped us do it. But yeah, it's not something that everybody does. And and there's a reason, because it's hard. It's really, really hard to do. And
Seems hard. It's hard to go to school, let alone start one.
It is really tricky, but it's definitely worth it. And it's really beautiful to see, I think, these ideas and concepts in action and the impact it's having on the children and the families and that kind of stuff. So I'm really proud.
So, I mean, the reason we got you in here is I think you're a lovely person to listen to all times of the year, but especially now when people are in that headspace of what is this year going to look like for me, what I'm going to take on this year. I think it's around this time you start to, you have your New Year's resolutions that you come up with sort of, I guess, on the 31st, you have a quick think about it. But I think now this is when the time when people start to think, what do I actually want to achieve this year? What do I want to get through? What do I want to tick off? And you've got, I guess you want to discuss a pretty big one that some people might be wanting to work through.
Yeah, so I thought today it would be really good to talk a little bit about healing, because I think, all of us have big stories in our lives. We have little traumas or big traumas that happen to us. We have our whole childhood experience that kind of shapes who we are. And I think we often reach a point in life where we do have to ask those questions, am I living my best life, or is this who I really want to be in the world? Or I hate the fact that I, fight with my kids all the time or my partner. And I think we all have the opportunity to reach a point in life where we actually have to stop and ask these questions of like, well, where am I and what am I doing and who do I want to be and where do I want to be in the world? And for me, I think one of the most important things when we're asking that question is, what do I want this to look like? We have to kind of look at our past in order to kind of change our future. And by that, I often mean that we need to often take a moment to look back to what we were imprinted and what happened to us that has actually shaped our story. And, a lot of the adults that I work with, they come to me because they've got challenges with their kids or their relationships, those kind of things. And so often we think it's about what's happening here, but it's actually usually everything that's happened beforehand that we are often repeating, or we are keeping that story and that belief system going that then shapes how we respond to whatever's happening in our moments in the future.
That makes me think of when I first started seeing a psychologist for the first time, and I thought I should do this. The reason that I told myself, the reason that I had for going to see someone was because I was, I'd just started dating someone, so Jam, who I'm still with now, and who struggles with anxiety. And so I thought, okay, well, I need to go, I should start seeing someone so I know, so I'm doing the right thing, for her. I really didn't think that I would need any therapy, because it's like, I didn't think that because I didn't have anxiety or depression. I was like, I don't need it. But it didn't take long before I realised that it's like, didn't talk about Jam much, just talked about me. Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, people used to come to me and were like, oh, my 5-year-old's doing this, or can you see my 8-year-old and help them? And I'm like, let's just talk about you first, and let's talk about what's going on in your world and what happened to you as a child and how you're turning up as a parent, because, children are often just responding to their environment, and usually they're those beautiful mirrors to bring up our own kind of stuff and story. So I think every human has the opportunity to do the work, right? To be able to look at what's my story and where am I at, because our default is often to project and blame everyone else, right? So I think what we've been taught about resilience and the amazing work that you guys do, Hugh, is that I think for a long time we've thought resilience is we go through something hard and then we just have to suck it up and push it down and then move on. And that's actually not resilience. Resilience is navigating something tricky and then leaning into the feelings that surround whatever's happened, working through them, asking for support, processing them, and then moving forward.
Which was so stunningly exemplified by Gina Chick's episode we had last year, where she absolutely said she felt every inch of the loss of her child, and talked about the way that she felt every emotion, and would have days where she lay on the floor screaming and crying, and other days where she couldn't get out of bed and wouldn't talk. And so, that is, I totally agree.
Yeah. And I think the thing with that is, though, most of us were not taught how to feel. And most of us were not given, we weren't modelled how to process big feelings. We weren't given the safe spaces to process them. So we've learned, I think, as a culture, as a race, to basically, when something happens, we just got to push it down, and we either ignore it or we numb it so we don't have to feel it. But then that takes its toll. It takes its toll on our bodies, takes its toll on mental health, it takes its toll on relationships. And so I think there is often a point where we stop and we go, does this serve me? And can I lean into some of this stuff? Because it has the impact to set up our lives in ways we don't want to.
So just to, I guess, set up this episode for people, this is for all of us, not just parents. This is for all of us to have a think about what is something in our lives that is causing tension, that is maybe getting in the way of us feeling joy, that's causing us stress, worry, anxiety, whatever it is, to address it this year. So how do we address it this year, and what are we going to do to move past that? So that's kind of what we're...
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And I want to talk about some tools of what we can do to do that. But I'd love to kind of just bring it back a bit to how a lot of sometimes what we're dealing with in this present moment is deeply connected to what happened to us as children and the stories and the imprints that we have, right? So I want to tell the story about my beautiful dad who's given me permission to share this story. And he's a 75-year-old man, and a few years ago he was unwell, and we started spending a bit more time together, and he started talking about his life, that kind of stuff. And he says to me, Lael, something happened to me when I was a kid that's pretty much shaped my whole life. And I was like, okay, tell me the story. So he tells me the story about how he was a 5-year-old little boy. He had an older sister. And my grandparents and my grandfather, he was in the war. And when he came back from the war, like most people probably who were in the war, they did not get the support they needed to process what they'd seen. And so my grandfather was a gambler. So he basically used to gamble all the money. So there was a lot of stress in the home. And so my granny, she spent most of her time just trying to keep a roof over their head. So, she was trying to deal with everything while my grandfather was dealing with his probably PTSD, all that kind of stuff. And so that's just to paint the picture of there's a lot of stress, right? And so my dad tells the story about one day he was about 5 years of age and he said, I was being a bit cheeky, I was being a bit naughty, I was just, acting out. And my granny finally hit that point and she marched him into his bedroom and she made him pack his bag. And then she took him out the front of his house and made him stand out the front of his house. And she said to him, the people from the naughty boys' home are coming to pick you up. And she left him out the front of his house. So there is my 5-year-old dad crying, watching these cars go by, wondering which car is coming to pick him up to take him away. Jeez. Right? Now that's a heartbreaking story when you hear it, right? And so my dad's telling me this story and I am like, oh, every part of me's like, oh my God. And he said to me, and you know what happened from that story, Lael, is he said, in that moment, I then decided I have to be a good boy in order to survive. And he said, and from that moment on, I just decided I have to keep everyone happy and I have to be good. And so then, as a 75-year-old man, he's saying to me, and you know what that's done my whole life? It means that I've been a really nice guy, but people have taken advantage of me. I haven't stood up for my boundaries. I haven't really followed what I've really wanted to do and live my career because it's been all about I need to keep everyone happy. And he said, because that little 5-year-old me often turned up in my life, even as a grown man. Now, that story, when we pull back from that, that story is not uncommon, in families, because when we reach capacity, when we are deeply stressed, we do and say things that we regret and we don't want to, and we want to take them back, right? And I have deep empathy and compassion for my granny, who would have been at her wit's end, and my grandfather and all, and nobody's wrong in this story. It's just a story. But that story is familiar to many people. I've worked with thousands of adults, and that story is similar to, being locked in their room or being told that they're too loud or too much, or that you're, too emotional, or perhaps you got upset about something and you got smacked or you got yelled at. And in those moments as children, what we do is we resort back to going, oh my goodness, I have to survive here because it's all about attachment and survival, so I'll be good. Now, that story, particularly for my dad, has shaped most of his life because he hasn't put himself out there and taken risks and done all those things because it's the little boy in him that is often calling the shots. And that is often what happens to most of us in our lives, and we don't even realise. We don't even realise what parts of us are turning up in situations where we're having a fight with our partner or we're navigating something with our kids or something goes on with a work colleague. A lot of the time when we're getting triggered, when we're getting activated, it is not the adult us in that situation. It's usually the wounded child that is turning up and that is protecting themselves or that is trying to keep themselves safe, because our core fundamental part of us as humans is always around protection. I need to keep myself safe. So, when we grow up in an environment where we learn really early on, oh, it's not okay to get upset, well, then I won't feel anything. And then perhaps we grow up to be an adult and we get into an intimate relationship and our partner's like, why don't you tell me how you feel, or why aren't you emotional? And every part of you's like, I can't be because it's deeply unsafe to be. And it's because of those younger parts of us, they often are still the ones who are calling the shots in our lives.
There's so much stuff going on for me at the moment from what you've just told. A million things I want to say, but just to pick up on something at the end there, I imagine you said it perfectly and so beautifully, but I imagine for a lot of people in that moment where their partner says, why can't you say anything here? They're unaware of why they can't say anything.
Oh, absolutely. And that to me is why we often have to do the deeper inquiry, because we often respond in ways that are kind of deeply rooted in the imprints that we've been shown, or in ways that are often really unconscious, that are all about protection. One of the things that I often talk about as a beautiful tool to work with is whenever we're getting activated, right? So whenever we're arguing or fighting, we're feeling really fired up, is a really amazing thing to just pause for a minute and just ask yourself the question, what am I making this mean? Like, what is here for me in this moment? So let me give you an example. So my husband and I have been together for like 25 years. And a few years ago, we were having an argument. It was about money or something like that. And he's getting, really fired up about something, and I'm coming back, and we're both really, really activated. And we don't usually fight a lot. So I'm like, there's something going on here for us. And kind of halfway through this fight, I just stop and I say to him, how old are you right now? Now he looks at me blankly, right? Because, he's like 50.
Good question.
but he knows what I mean. And what I'm meaning is, how old do you feel in this moment? Are you like the 50-year-old embodied man that I know you are, or is something else going on? And he says to me, he goes, I'm 14. And I said, and what's happening? And he goes, I feel like I'm making it all up and I need someone to guide me and I don't know what I'm doing.
Whoa.
And then he said to me, how old are you? And I go, I'm 4. And he's like, and what's going on for you? And I'm like, I feel like a 4-year-old who's trying to make it all okay for everybody. Now, what was amazing in that moment is that we both just paused, because in that situation, we're both like, there's a wounded part of you being activated here and there's a wounded part of me, and we're basically having it out, right? And no one's going to win in this situation here. And what that did is it made us both just kind of drop into this empathetic place. And I was like, oh man, what's going on for you? And then he started sharing the story. I felt this pressure as a kid, and then he's like, what happened for you? And I'm like, I always felt like I had to make it all okay. And then we basically were able to move away from what it was that we were fighting about to go, actually, there's just parts of us that are being activated here. Now, this happens for us actually all the time and we don't often realise. And I've just finished writing my second book, which is coming out this year. I'll just give it a little plug. Thanks, everyone. And the book,
what's it called?
The title's not final.
60 Shades of Grey.
Oh, now that's a different kind of book. But the book writing process for me is not one that is an easy process, right? And so I find it really challenging. And again, what I'm getting to in this story is that a lot of the times when I'd be like, oh, I can't do it and this feels hard, and kind of as a joke, I was having this moment at home like, oh, this is, I don't really like it and it sucks. I don't think it's very good. And my husband jokingly looks at me and goes, how old are you right now? Right? And I laugh and I was like, 13. And he's like, oh, what's going on? And I'm like, I feel like I'm back in high school and I'm really bad at English and it doesn't feel good. And he's like immediately like, what do you need? And I'm like, well, firstly, I need a hug. And then actually what I need is just to remind myself, you're not 13 and it's okay that you feel like, it might not be the best work ever, and it's okay that what's activating in that moment is the younger parts of me that kind of believed I wasn't smart enough, right? And that's what's turning up in the adult self. Now, as an adult, I could keep ruminating on that and I could make myself wrong and think I'm not good enough, and I could choose not to put the book out there in the world, and I could keep myself small. But I see that as a beautiful opportunity to go, hey, there's a part of me from when I was younger that felt hurt or that got stuck with something or that had a bit of a trauma around something, and it's actually activating in the adult self right now. And it's an opportunity to kind of go back to that younger part of me and go, hey, at 13, you're not meant to know everything, and to be really kind to like the younger Lael and say, you were doing the best you can. And when I could lean into that, it eases what's sitting there now, because we're actually addressing the kind of parts of us that often turn up that are actually just asking to be listened to.
How do you figure out because that's amazing that your dad was able or has been able to at some point in his life pinpoint that moment where he's been taken out the front of the house. And no doubt you're able to go back into your own life and think it. But I think for a lot of people, it would be really hard to pinpoint a moment in your childhood that explains why you are the way you are.
It's a really great question. And a lot of people often say to me, I can't remember anything about my childhood. And I think that's a bit of a protective mechanism that we do. Sometimes when we have trauma or we have hurt, we actually, in order to protect ourselves, we go, I can't remember what it is. And it's not that you have to remember, this incident happened to me and that's what it means. I often just invite people to go, do you feel like you're anchored, embodied adult self, or do you feel like, that unsure teenager, or do you feel a bit like a little kid that wants to have a tantrum? I think we can all have a sense of that. So you don't need to know what happened and what the story was. Sometimes the story can help us go, oh gosh, that is so why I do what I do. But it's more about in those moments when we are having conflict or when we are really assessing, who do I want to be in the world, when we can just tune into, are there parts of me here that are wanting to be healed, listened to, addressed in order to help me move forward? Because a lot of the times what we do is when we don't address those themes or imprints or stories, we just keep repeating the same thing. You know, and whether that is we keep looking for a partner who doesn't listen to us or treats us poorly, or you know, we keep, you know, doing a job and we keep getting, you know, finding that we're not able to do, you know, what we want to do because we're really passionate about it, because we've been told we have to get a safe job, or we've all got stories and imprints, right? We've all got this whole beautiful tapestry of life that we were born into. And as children, we watch everything that happens and then we make it mean stuff. Now, whether it's actually true or not, it's really all about our perception of what we believe it means. And then that is often what we take forward into life. And we often keep looking for evidence that it's actually true.
So, so I've got two things just very quickly. One's going back a little bit. So when you talked about identifying the age that you are during an argument with your husband. So I often, you know, we have an episode a week here, and when people come on and they suggest practical things, I often run it in my head very quickly. And sometimes I think, yeah, that would work for me. Or other times I think, no, it wouldn't work for me, but I'm sure it works for you and will for other people. So Penny and I actually had it wasn't a fight, but we had a disagreement about money the other night. And so I was able to do the exact example in my head. And it was an example where Penny was probably being more generous than I was. As in thinking we should do something with some money for some other people. And I disagreed, and I was thinking, am I a really bad person? I don't want to give this here. I must be, and that's what it got to. And I could see Penny looking at me thinking, like, why wouldn't you want to do that? And I was saying, no, we need to keep this for, but as you were saying that, I was like, well, how old was I in that disagreement? And I was thinking, I reckon I was 15. Every now and again, mum and dad would have stress, and I'll check with mum and dad, they're happy with this, but but money was a stressful thing for mum and dad at certain points in their life. And I was straight away, I was a 15-year-old version of myself listening to them be stressed about money. And I'm thinking, no, we don't know always going to have it, so let's not give that. Yeah. That's the first thing. So I can't talk to where Penny was at with that disagreement. But for me personally, I was 15 years old overhearing mum and dad have a stressful conversation about money, and so my instinct is let's hang on to that.
Well, as I'm 15 years old now, I'm thinking like, well, can I have some of that money? Like, I would love some. If you're thinking of giving some away, like my 15-year-old self is like, I'd love some of that money. That'd be great.
No, weren't you working at General Pants? You were fine.
Not at 15.
Okay,
I didn't have a job yet at 15. So
yeah. So I think that's a really. For me, that works. Is there an age of your life that's screaming at you right now where?
Yeah, and I think it's not always the case. Like sometimes we get into arguments, or sometimes something happens, and it's just saying our boundaries are being crossed, or there's something we feel passionate about, and it's not the younger parts of us being activated. But a lot of the time when we are being irrational, over the top, where we're needing to prove a point, you know, we know when we're not being our best self.
What the point of the argument is.
Yeah, it's because there's something being activated. Because I often go, well, what's the embodied kind of adult, you know, version of this? Well, it would be calm, and it would be really listening to what you've got to say and saying, yeah, okay, that's interesting, and wonder how we can all get our needs met here, and how does that feel for you? And it would be a calm conversation, because it would be kind of the adult part of us who knows how to dialogue and have those conversations in a really respectful way. But when we're getting heated and when we're getting fired up, then I often find that's usually a really good indicator that something else is going on. I mean, that happens in parenting all the time as well.
Eckhart Tolle, friend of mine from Germany, he I think refers to it as the pain body, is how he talks about it. It's like there's like ego, and then there's the pain body, where it's like you're like taken over by a version of yourself which is in pain from the past. Yeah,
it's exactly that. And there's many different modalities or things that people call it. And for me, I often talk about, you know, to simplify it, often, you know, as a first starting point, when something's up for me, I always ask the question, what's here for me? What am I making this mean in this moment? So am I making it mean I'm not good enough? Am I making it mean I'm not being heard? Like whatever it is, like just to actually just put a pause in something to go, what is happening in this moment? Because our default, because a lot of what we've learned is to project it onto someone else and make someone else wrong. If you only did this, then I would be okay. And if you listened to me better, then it would be all right. But everything is an invitation for, I think, inquiry into ourselves. And, you know, I think in all relationships that we have, whenever something's going on and we feel something moving, to actually take a moment, take a breath and go, what's happening for me right now is one of the most powerful things we can do. Because in that moment you can take a breath and you can go, I'm feeling really angry. Right? What am I feeling angry about? I'm feeling angry because my boundaries are being crossed. Okay, so what do I need to do about that? Or I'm feeling really angry because I'm actually really tired and I need a break, or I'm feeling really angry because that feels super disrespectful to me and I don't like being disrespected. And then all of a sudden we just go into this massive spiral of something about respect, right? And we can kind of trace that back to, well, where does that come from for you? So I think it's a really beautiful self-processing tool to often be curious to take a moment and go, what's here for me? Because, imagine the world, right? If everyone, when something pops up in them, they're able to pause and go, there's something here for me. But we don't do that. We immediately make it about the other person or the institution or the system or whatever. And yes, there's a lot to be angry about, right? There's a lot that's not okay in our world. But imagine if we all had the opportunity or the capabilities to pause for a minute and go, what's here for me? Because then we would be actually owning our stories. We'd be able to lean into them a little bit more to see what is needing some healing or what is being asked of me to shift or move, then we would be in so much more conscious relationships, right? But again, and I have to come back to compassion, most of us were never modelled this or taught how to do this, right? This is a huge thing for most people because most of us have got a really strong attachment to making other people wrong and to being right.
Well, the kind of cliche that, I didn't have this in my family with my dad, but the kind of the cliched film version is like if you get picked on at school, all right, let's learn how to fight so you can defend yourself and fight back as opposed to doing what you're talking about. And that's when you're actually a kid, let alone when you're an adult.
Yeah.
But it seems to be, because I often, the more I've done this podcast and the more I've been thinking in terms of like just compassion, something that I really had no idea of up until about 10 years ago, really, is to not only think about it in yourself, but I guess also just assume that the other person is also going through something.
Yes.
As and assume that like, if, I've struggled in certain ways. So if you're going to think about yourself, then to also kind of assume that the other person, if they're acting in a shitty way, assume that, they're probably 10 years old as well.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful point. I do really think that we are mostly wounded children walking around in adult bodies, bumping into each other, activating each other's stuff. Like that's kind of what we are, right?
That's nice.
Yeah, it kind of is. And again, amazing if every adult we met and then we saw the younger version of them, we'd be like, oh, what was your story?
It'd be good if we all carried around little cards on us that had a number on it.
Yeah.
And we just held it up as we were discussing, like put him in having an just so you know, I'm 7 at the moment. So this is this is
I was imagining a step further. You know that, I don't know how full is my bucket, that book?
Where
there's the buckets, the imaginary buckets over their head.
Yeah.
I was just imagining like if everyone just was the age, like you saw them as that. So like if you come into work and everyone comes in, they're like, David's like 8. There's like an 8-year-old kid walking into it. He must be,
Well, that's going to be we'll be able to do that soon with AR goggles. Like when we're all wearing AR glasses, we actually can walk at whatever age we want. We can see each other as that age. It'd be brilliant.
And I think the thing about this though, and it's a beautiful thing to ponder, is a lot of people as adults are still really being run by the childhood wounds of themselves. They still have big tantrums like a 4 or 5-year-old, and I'm all for expressing feelings, right? But as an adult, there's healthier ways to do it. And so I think that is the thing, is that a lot of us haven't been taught how to reflect on that, but a lot of us walk through life operating from those wounded parts of us. And that doesn't make for healthy relationship. And it also doesn't make for, I guess, living our best lives or kind of, going for the things that we really love and want to do, because we're often operating from those scared, protective parts of us. And the inner child parts of us they are just a gift because they are there trying to keep us safe. Every single part of, whether it's 13-year-old you turning up or 4-year-old you or whatever it is, what they're doing is they're standing there with a bit of a flag going, be careful, like, this is dangerous. Don't share your feelings here because you could get hurt, right? Or 13-year-olds, you like, no, don't try something new because they might find out that you're not smart, right? And that will be really hard. And so stay safe, right?
Yeah.
Protection. So they're coming with this place which is about protection. So they're not wrong. But when they turn up, I think our job is to be curious about them and go, you're a part of me trying to keep me safe here. But what I need to let 13-year-old me know is that, hey, I'm actually an adult now and I've done lots of good things and it is okay for me to make mistakes and I don't have to know everything and it's safer for me now to kind of move out into the world. Whereas when I was 13, none of that felt safe, right? And I didn't have the words or the support or the knowledge or the insights to know how to navigate it.
I'm conscious of the fact a little while ago I said I've got two things and I only said one thing, and not a single listener right now is going, but what is Hugh's second thing? But I do want to bring it up because I think it answers a question that Ryan had before as well around how do we actually go back and identify stories from our past that might be influencing our adult self. I've been doing a thing recently. So I'll mention Gina Chick again. We had her on the podcast last year and she talked about people mourning different things in their lives. And she said one of the things that people mourn is their youth.
Yes.
And that hit me really hard. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm doing that at the moment. I am absolutely mourning my youth. And because I've noticed that when different songs come on the radio, if straight away it brings up a memory or like, it's a song from the 90s or the 2000s, I've been sort of turning it off straight away. And then since she said that, I've been, no, I'll listen to them. And I've now actually gone to, if you've listened to digital radio, there's about 17,500 different stations you can choose from. So you can be very specific. But I've been going through, there's like 90s hip hop I just listened to nonstop and I just listened to it. And every song almost had a story attached to it. These stories are coming from my childhood, whether it was parties or it was, or feelings I had listening to music on the way, on the tram to or from school. And all these stories came up that I had forgotten about. And now at the moment it's Triple M 2000s. And the other day, a song that if you asked me about it a month ago, I'd go, that's just a cheesy anthem from the early 2000s. Iris by the Goo Goo Dolls came on and I got really teary in the car.
Wow.
And I just had this memory of something happening in like 2001, 2002. It was like, and all these stories that just keep coming up from. So I know this is probably no science to back this up, but like listening to music from your past and just actually listening to it, like not skipping to going, oh, yeah, it's a good song, but I wonder if I find a better one. So yeah, just listening to songs from different, I obviously listened to a lot of Triple M in the early 2000s, and I'm hearing these songs pop up that I definitely wouldn't seek out in my everyday life. But when I actually sit there and listen to them, it's bringing up stories and events and memories that I had forgotten about. So that might be a nice way to.
Yeah.
I get that with I get it with music a bit, but more so like ads. Like Lubemobile and Roof Seal.
What about Franco Cozzo?
Those ads from when I used to watch like cricket or tennis in the summer or footy. It's like the ads that would come on during that, like often those ads when I hear them again, they're
pick apart.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe some of them Victorian ads, but there's so
I
many.
think it's a beautiful thing that you're saying too, and it's. I also want to flag, some people have had really traumatic upbringings, right? And I don't recommend just diving into that. If you have had a big story and a big trauma, I am a big, big fan of therapy and getting some support. And you have to go gently. Like you have to go at a pace that feels okay for you.
With compassion.
With compassion, always with compassion, right? So I think it's really important that for some people, support is really fundamental when we actually starting to unpack and look at some of the stories that have happened to us. But what you're saying is beautiful, Hugh, is that I trust that the fact that you're getting emotional now is because there's a part is now able to feel perhaps what you needed to feel at the time that maybe you weren't, right? And so now as an adult that you can actually go back to that time in your life and go, actually, that felt really big for me and I did feel lonely and I didn't get what I needed at the time. And what a beautiful moment here as I'm driving along in the car and I'm listening to this, that I do have some tears and I'm just acknowledging, gosh, that was a big part of my life and I'm just going to feel what I need to feel around it so then we can let it go. Because that's the goal here. The goal is to feel what we needed to around the situation to move it. And, one of the things when you're talking about grieving is, sometimes when I work with adults and they go back a bit into their childhoods around stuff that happened with their parents and perhaps they didn't get their needs met and perhaps their parents weren't able to meet them emotionally in the way they wanted. And again, I always stand in a place that we're all doing the best job we know how and there's no blame to our parents. They're doing the best they could at the time. But often what can happen is when we start to look at what it was that you deeply wanted as a child that you didn't get, what they can begin to see is that they keep looking for that, hoping that that will change. So even as an adult, they might go back to their parents and say, hey, I achieved this thing. And their parents don't say, oh, well done. You know, they're still looking for that approval. Or perhaps they turn up at their parents' house and they're really upset and emotional and the parents are like, oh, you know, have you seen my garden? And they just deflect what's going on. And what can often happen is there comes a time, I think, for a lot of adults where we realise that perhaps our parents aren't able to give us what we deeply wanted and needed, right? And we keep going back hoping that it'll be different. And then there comes a point where we actually go, I have to grieve that I'm actually not going to get that. I have to actually be aware that what I'm looking for them, they may not be able to give me. And that is often, again, when we're looking at doing this healing work, where sometimes we have to reparent ourselves, where sometimes we have to move into, I can understand why my parents aren't able to meet me emotionally, or they're not able to say they're proud of me or whatever, because that's their story and that's who they are. But I'm actually now going to make the choice to be kind to myself and give my inner child what it needed that it didn't get. And that is a really powerful place to sit in as a human, because we're no longer looking outside of ourselves to fill ourselves up. We're actually now getting to this place where we go, I'm going to love on the younger part of me that learnt that it wasn't safe to feel. Well, I'm going to actually now start to be around people who feel safe enough where they validate it is okay to feel. And I'm going to look for evidence that I can change that story and that imprint. And that's how we actually do the work, because we begin to go, I've looked a lot of my life to be filled up by others or to know that it's okay. And actually really where it comes back to is within ourselves, which is always the work. All the good philosophers and spiritual teachers, they say that. All the work is always within. It's the reparenting of ourselves. It's loving ourselves. It's giving ourselves that beautiful healing and validation that often we didn't get when we were younger.
You may have just answered my next question already, but before I ask it, I wanted to say how much I love the age thing, the prompt we were talking about before. But I do think that, and I love that you started to turn the questions inward, because I feel like for you and your husband, you're probably like level 99 emotional regulators. And but I think for a lot of people,
who's at 100?
No one. It's an unachievable number. Ryan's mate, maybe. Eckhart Tolle.
Oh, you tell you.
Yeah.
I was picturing at one end of the scale is like you've got ET and Lael, and then at the other end you've got Simeon, who came to our show, who came to our live show of the podcast.
Yeah.
I'm still yet to
working
meet.
on it.
I haven't met Simeon yet myself, actually. I'm always out of the room when he's in there. It's weird.
Because I imagine that in an argument, asking your partner what age they are, if you've never gone there before, could be
it's not going to go well.
No.
And that's why I say
like
you've got to
starting with yourself.
Yeah, starting with yourself's great, and it's a concept that you can introduce. And for a lot of people, the answer will be, "What are you talking about? It's ridiculous." Like I know that's not normal. Yeah, totally.
I would like some people to try it and then write it in. Tell us what their partner said in the middle of like, hey, just a quick one. How old are you right now?
But I think the key thing of this is that, I mean, for me, the most important takeaway from that is when we're in the middle of something big and heated, it takes one person in that moment to just pause and take a step back and go, okay, neither of us are in our best selves here having this conversation, and it's not going to go well, right? It's not going to go to the place we want to, because we're both in defense, we're both in this protection mode, we're both in this like, but I need to be right and you don't understand. And whenever we're in a discussion like that, it's never going to get the result that we want, right? And from my experience, and I think that the people I've worked with over all these years, that usually is the wounded child surfacing when we're ever having arguments like that. And again, it's something that we often have to work towards. Like sometimes firstly in relationships, we just have to start with, how are you feeling? And I'm feeling this and I am making it mean this. And we actually just start by owning what is here for us, not blaming. And then we can kind of build on some tools to work towards what's turning up for us here to be healed and to be looked at. And this is a process, right? And I think we have to be so kind and compassionate to ourselves, because I think when we're talking about this work, this is, for many parents or adults, this is like the first generation of having some level of consciousness and awareness, right? So our parents and our grandparents, they didn't have access to the internet and all these amazing concepts and stuff that we're learning, right? They were just doing what was done to them. And so I think, this generation of humans that we are now, we have access to so much more emotional awareness and understanding. And it's really clunky when we start doing it. It's like we're the first generation of really maybe owning our deep shadow and our stuff and doing the inner healing work and then helping, working with that with our children on a whole other level. So it's hard because you're undoing, many, many generations perhaps of traumas and projections and all that kind of stuff. So it's not easy, right? And we have to be kind and compassionate, and we take one step forward and 5 back and we mess it up. But my big belief is the more we can do this work as adults, and particularly if you are a parent, then the less crap your kids are going to have to deal with, right? Because we are getting better at owning our stuff. We are getting better at healing what is there, so then that we're not projecting that onto our children. And then they have the opportunity then to move forward in life even with an even greater level of consciousness. So it's not easy. And I think we've got to be kind and compassionate. We've got to start small, right? Just even owning, I'm feeling angry. And that's nobody else's fault. I'm just angry and I'm going to feel it and I'm going to find a place to move it in a healthy way. That's a win, right? That's massive.
I'm struck by something that my psychologist said to me a few years ago, but I'd been seeing her for quite a long time at this point. We'd got to a point where we'd uncovered some stuff that I won't go into here, but that I hadn't really labelled and realised was trauma. And we got to this point of discussing it, and it was one of those huge sessions that you have where you're like, that was massive. And one of the things she talked about, I can't remember if it was that time or probably at a later point, was how when my kids reach the age that happened, it's going to be really hard for me to not either ignore it completely or go into overprotection mode and smother them.
Yeah.
And finding a middle ground where I'm actually able to be an adult in that situation, the parent they need to be, is going to be really difficult and something I'm going to have to work really hard at. And we had some things and that I'm happy to go into afterwards for how to deal with that. But one of the things that strikes me in this conversation is that you were just talking about sort of, I guess, intergenerational trauma to a degree and repeating the mistakes or things that happened to you. But you might not know that. I feel like if I hadn't have had that conversation with her, I wouldn't have known that this issue was coming up on the horizon, that was going to be a trigger point in the future for me. And I wouldn't have known to start doing the work beforehand to allow myself the ability to do what was necessary at the time. So I think what you're saying is really resonating with me so much, that the idea that you need to start early. Before these moments happen
ideally, and that's why therapy's awesome, right? Therapy's amazing because we can do lots more reflection and we can start looking at it. But regardless of whether you did that therapy or not, the story would probably be activated as your kids grow, right? And we can't catch everything. We don't know. I mean, I have a classic story of my son. I think when he was about 16, 17, and he used to play really high level soccer. So he was really good, and he played in good rep teams and all that stuff. And I'm not a very competitive person, but there were trials for a team and he didn't get picked. And there was a bit of nepotism going on in the team, and the coach's son got picked and someone else, right? And I saw red. Like, I was outraged. I was angry. This is not fair. I'm going to ring the club. Like, I am going off. And my husband and son are looking at me like, what is here for you, right? Because I'm not usually into that. But it's unfair. Like, and I am more activated. My son's kind of like, oh, I didn't get picked, it's fine. But I am like outraged.
How old were you?
Well, yes. How old was I? I was 10.
He was 16. You were 10.
Yeah. So what happened was really what activated in me is I remember I was angry, and then they're kind of like, you need to calm down. Like, what's going on here? And what was arising in me was this shame, this embarrassment, this feeling of not good enough. And I went right back into when I was 10 and I didn't get picked in this dance squad that I wanted to be in. And I was so embarrassed and I was so full of shame and I felt not good enough. And in that moment where my son didn't get picked, and he actually didn't even care, right? I am activated back into that story again. And it was really big because I had to just kind of take a moment and go, what is here for me? Well, what's here for me is this wound that feels really uncomfortable and embarrassing and horrible that I don't want to feel, but it's really making itself known because I'm having this massive reaction. And it was all about 10-year-old Lael that didn't get picked. Now, the piece of that, what actually was really important is that shame and embarrassment and feeling I had when I was 10, nobody helped me with that. I had to internalize that because nobody was around to kind of go, hey, you okay? And how does that feel? And what's going on? So I just internalized it. And then, 30 years later when I'm a parent and my son's going through something, it just activates in me and all of a sudden I'm fired up. It's got nothing to do with my son. It was all about just him not being picked, activated this story within me. Now that happens a lot for us as parents.
Especially at kids' sport. I feel like you're
You're
seeing a lot of,
Yeah.
well, I shouldn't say dads, but a lot of parents who didn't quite make it themselves.
Totally.
And if there's anything that acts to prevent their kids making it, it's like, I know a couple of people who have made it in sport, who are dads at sport, and I'll ask them what it's like. Like, I don't say a word. I just watch and these people who it's been their life playing this sport, happy to sit back and watch. Whereas there's some parents who, anyway.
Yeah, it's a really big thing, and I think that's the thing with where parenting is just like the most amazing portal into all your own crap, right? Is that our kids are going to mirror stuff for us.
I was just thinking, I'm going to have to, I think, book in all my, like as soon as they start hitting their teens, I'm going to have to really go back to my psychologist every week just to make sure I'm not buggering it up for them.
And it's big. Like I've worked with teenagers for a long time and parents of teenagers. When our kids start to go through puberty, oh man, it fires stuff up in us, and I kind of joke, oh, you get to go through puberty all over again, right? All the awkwardness, all the stuff around bodies and sex and am I pretty enough? Am I this enough? Like it all rises because we're watching our children begin to navigate that. And again, the invitation is not to take your stuff and place it onto your kids because our kids are like, hey, I need to navigate this in my own way. And I think that is a big thing. We want to protect our children. We want to keep them safe. Like every single part of us is like, I want you to be okay. And so when we've got our own stories and traumas that we haven't worked through, we will often overreach by, I don't want that to happen to them, so I'm going to interfere, I'm going to control, or I'm going to do all this so that they don't have to experience the same thing I have to experience. Yeah.
Such a powerful concept to think through and to work through. By way of summary, are you able to, for anyone who's like, I need to start doing this, is it possible to summarize everything we've just spoken about into a few simple
steps?
Like,
yeah. So the first step is always just be curious about how you're feeling.
Saying be cute.
No, be cute. Be cute and be curious. Yeah. So what you want to do is you basically want to, in that moment, whenever you are not in balance, whenever you're not feeling that kind of calm, anchored, centered, and you're feeling off, to be curious, to clock it and go, oh, there's something going on for me here, right? So the first thing is just be curious. I'm noticing something's going on. Then you could ask yourself the question, what am I feeling in this moment? So it might be I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling nervous, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling frustrated, whatever. And then you can go a bit further. Does this remind me of something? Like, does this remind me of an age? Does it remind me of a feeling I felt before? Like, what is here? Like I often say, what's around me in this moment? So what am I energetically kind of feeling in this moment where something's off? And then sometimes the first step is just being aware of that. And then you don't even act on it. You're just aware of it. I find a really wonderful tip to do is to pick up a pen and paper and actually write something. And if you even write the question, what am I feeling right now? I feel angry, frustrated. And then you might ask the question, and does this remind me of anything? And then you might go, yeah, it reminds me of when I was 10 and my younger brother did this, this and this. And we start to actually kind of open up a little bit around what's present here. So we're just being curious about it. Now, if we're a parent or at work and we don't have the opportunity to just go away for 15 minutes and be quiet and tune into that because we've still got to do life, I often say just clock. There's something here for me. And I often used to just put it in a box on my shoulder and go, I'm going to come back to that in a minute. I've got to deal with whatever's happening here. But I'm going to come back and pick up, there was something there for me. There's something that's really activating, something pissing me off, or there's something there. So when we kind of ask those questions, what am I feeling? What's here? What's around? Does it remind me of something? Usually we will get to a point where we will pinpoint a feeling or something that happens that doesn't feel good. So then if you can get that and you want to go a step further and you can kind of identify, maybe there's a younger part of me being activated here, the simplest question we can then do is, what does that younger part of me need? What did they need that they didn't get at the time? Now, if we go back to, like I was sharing that story about, not feeling smart enough or that kind of stuff, and that story is one that's popped up in many times, especially when I built my school. My God, I was talking to lawyers and writing policies and all sorts of stuff, and the 13-year-old me was alive and well because it kept going, you're not smart enough, you can't do this. And every time it would pop up, I'd be like, all right, take a seat, like sit down. I'd imagine almost 13-year-old beside me. And I would tell her what she needed to hear at the time, which is I would say to her, you don't have to know everything. And we can ask for help. And it's okay that we don't know where this is going to go. And you are enough just the way you are, right? And you don't have to be smart to be validated in the world. Like, it's okay. And I would just keep saying that to her. And as I would say that, I would imagine, I could feel it kind of the anxiety or the stress would lessen. And so we started giving those beautiful words that she probably needed at the time that she didn't get. And this is kind of what we call a bit about reparenting, is we're giving the younger parts of us the words and the love and the compassion that they didn't get at the time, right? And then when we do that, we can often feel a softening within ourselves. We can feel more compassion for ourselves, and then we're able to integrate that younger part of us into us so that the adult part can turn up.
It's beautiful. That's so great. I don't think I've officially never said this before, but I think I'm stoned.
With Lael.
Yes. That's so helpful. I think what a great thing to talk about this time of year. I think it really is. It's the perfect time, I reckon, when you are thinking about the way you want to be this year. I think very fundamental to living a fulfilled and happy life is dealing with the stuff that perhaps you had decided to leave behind.
Yeah, and I think, again, like, if that, what I just explained then sounds big, I'm like, go talk to someone, because sometimes we actually need someone to hold that space for us, to ask us the right questions so we can tune into it. And I think, again, compassion is always my default here. If we've never been able to, or it hasn't been safe enough for us to feel, doing something like I just said then is going to feel massive. It's going to feel big and it's going to feel scary. And we're also often like, am I going to open a Pandora's box here and what's going to come out? And that's why you've got to go gently. It's why sometimes we need support to do this work. But for me,
you mean like professional support?
Yeah, like a therapist, psychologist, whatever it is, whatever works for you. But I think even if we can do one thing, which is that when in the heat of a moment, when we're activated, when we're scared, when we're anxious, to just take a moment and pause and just be kind to ourselves and say, hey, there's something going on for me here and I might not know what it is, but I'm just going to own it. I'm just going to own it. Because then what it does is it stops us then projecting onto everyone else. And that's kind of the key part. That's the first step that we want to do, is just to be able to own there's something here for me. I'm going to just lean into it a little bit, and then what I do with it, I can go journal, I can go speak to a friend, I can go see a therapist. But that is the first step of being aware, right, and doing our work.
Lael, thank you so much. It is just such a, I mean, there's a reason we've had you back 3 times now. It is just so relatable and important. And I think, it's so practical as well, which I love so much.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, Lael.
Amazing.
And the book will be out this year.
Yes.
It doesn't have a name yet, but
yep, so but it'll come out.
Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Lael Stone. I'll think of some more for you, but that's
thank you.
That's on the short list.
I think I'm preferring that than Let's Get Stoned with Lael.
Or 60 Shades of Grey.
Thank you, Lael.
It's a pleasure.